Okay, and I think we are live. Welcome back. Happy 2025.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
Happy New Year to you, to all of our friends and family, those who will catch the live stream, and those people who will go and check the video out later. Actually, I'm not sure when the last time that we started this way, but it may be appropriate to start with a word of prayer, considering all that's up against us.
sure.
So, dear Father, we thank you for the blessing to see 2025. We pray for our own families and all the families that's connected to this. We pray for a prosperous 2025. And we pray for those people in California that are being affected by the wildfires and believe that things are turning around in their favor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, man. So, yeah, it's been quite a while since, let's see, when was our last? I think it was right before Thanksgiving. Oh, no, not before Thanksgiving.
For
Before
Christmas.
Christmas, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how was your Christmas?
It was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas Day itself was very busy,
Mm-hmm.
and but it was a blessing. Got a chance to spend time with family and friends, and we're in Metro Atlanta,
Mm.
so just like a lot of the people up north, a few days ago, maybe about a week ago, we had some snow.
Yep.
And I was just saying to a client, we sing these songs around Christmas time about building snowmen and all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
little did we know, some of the young people, well, not just the younger people of all ages in Metro Atlanta were building snowmen. I saw two snowmen in in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been different already,
Yeah.
2025.
Indeed, yeah. I think it's been about since we got about that much snow, maybe like almost 10 years, maybe 11 years. I think it snowed a lot in like 2014. I want to say, the last time when it snowed and shut things down. We might have had like a little bit of snow here and there. I know it was the first time it snowed since I've been at this house, so um, yeah, it was a interesting. I was prepared, so I didn't have to go too many places. I work from home, so I wasn't really too badly affected. But I know other people, they were out of school, out of work, and everything. So nice little switch up to their week.
And I mentioned California in our prayer, but you reminded me of something when you made mention that people took off from work and school. There's so many different tentacles to this wildfire thing that I hadn't thought about until I spent some time watching some news about it.
Mm-hmm.
And just right off the rip, you think about all the buildings and landscape that's burning. But it wasn't until they started interviewing people that I realized just how much displacement is going on. For example, this one guy was talking about having to go get his child from school
Mm-hmm.
because the fire was closing in on his child's school. They had to they had to evacuate the school in a huff. Then you have businesses that got burnt up, and so now you have these business owners who have employees. Their business has been burnt down.
Mm-hmm.
The last I heard, we were talking as much as $160 billion worth of damage in California, which it take insurance companies from all over the world to foot that bill.
Mm-hmm.
The wildfire is still going, so it's more than an ocean, more than an ocean. So many tentacles to this problem. And I heard a stat that if California was a country unto itself, which I don't know if you've heard rumblings along the way. Every now and then you hear some talk about California wanting to break off and be its own country.
Right.
But if they had done that, they would be number five in the world in terms of the wealth and the revenues, GDP.
Mm.
So I say all of that to say that for some people on the East Coast, they may think that that's not affecting them. But when you have a state that's a part of the country that's impacted on that level, ultimately it impacts the entire country.
For sure. It's gonna be a major thing throughout 2025. Just how we handle I, I I don't know if we would refer to them as refugees or just people survivors of the fires, but yeah, them being displaced, whatever businesses were operating in that area. I do know they were trying to, or they had talks about turning that area, or I think the one thing is I haven't been super I guess researching into it. I've just heard different sound bites here and there, so I don't want to say things that I'm not sure are factual or not. But just I heard there were plans for that area. I know I'm not exactly sure how close it is to like tech hubs and stuff over on the West Coast. I'm not very familiar with I've never been to California. The furthest west I've been is Nevada. So yeah, I've always wanted to go to California, but never actually got the chance. So doesn't look like 2025 will be the year that I'll get to go. So yeah, well, they'll stay in our prayers for sure. And yeah, I just hope that things turn around. I'm starting to finally see that they're starting to, or at least started to see some headlines that they're getting some things under control. But just the images that I've seen from there are just crazy. It's everything's on fire. Looks it looks scary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, you know that uh, the people in Louisiana, New Orleans in particular, are still pulling things back together after the terrorist act that they experienced.
Mm.
So, one of my mentors, and, I try to be respectful of all the different types of experiences of people who join us. But one of my teachers said that without making a whole lot of big time predictions and statements about what 25 would be or wouldn't be, he said that we would need Jesus in 2025. And it's looking like that, just how things have gotten off to a start. Now, I know in a little while we're going to get into talking about goal setting. And as a coach, that's something that I've found has been helpful to a lot of people over the years. But I can't resist. I have to ask you,
Mm.
and I don't know if you had a chance to research it, although I know you've heard about it, the lawsuit
Mm.
that Nick has brought against.
Against Kendrick or against UMG. Let's get that right. Oh
Right.
yes.
So, any thoughts about that? You want to maybe
Oh,
talk about that a little
for
bit
sure.
with the audience, because people. We had a whole episode where, if I'm not mistaken, we talked about the beef and who won and all that kind of stuff, and I'm pretty sure some of your listeners would be curious to hear what your thoughts are about that whole thing.
Yes, for sure. I was actually gonna tie some of that into goal setting because my the way I look at it, Drake made some. It's hard for, and I think a lot of people don't want to admit, but I think Drake has made some very bad business moves in the past. So a lot of people are looking at his renegotiation with UMG, but I think all of this stems from his original deal that he signed with UMG for 400 million. So it was very lucrative at the beginning, but I don't. It doesn't look like he ever had an exit strategy, and so that was where I was saying his goals weren't necessarily stacked up in the right way. I would say because for any, especially for you and me, turning down $400 million would sound crazy, but for someone who was in Drake's position at that time, that would have been his his best option in my opinion because he had all of the attention. He had hot music at the time. That's why they signed him for that much. So if he took that power that he had at that point and decided to go independent early, then that would have completely shaken up the music industry. And I think what's happened now, and this is something that everyone kind of needs to understand when it does come to negotiations, is you there's a time to cash in and there's a time to pull out. So at the time when he got offered that money, when they're offering you that much money, then that means that they know that you can get triple that by yourself. So whatever a company is willing to to pay you, they know that that evaluation of your worth is much higher than that. And I think where it was difficult for Drake to see that is coming up. I won't say he never had to, it's not about a struggle thing, but he's never had to necessarily build anything from the ground up. So if we're talking about like Kanye, for instance, had to kind of start from ground zero in terms of making beats, getting his name known, then finally getting himself into the proper position to be with Jay Z, signed with Rock Nation, all of that. I think he had a little bit more of an understanding of how to build things, and then he did the Yeezy. He was putting his projects together in a certain way that showed you he knew how to complete things. And I kind of thought, like, in terms of business moves, I thought Drake was a step ahead of a lot of people with how he structured his deal with Young Money early on, because he wasn't signed directly to them, but he was still able to kind of get still get all of the popularity from them without having to be tied to them for his whole career. And so when he made that move, I was like, oh yeah, he's ahead of the game. He didn't sign a 360 with them. But later on, when he got with UMG, he kind of had his own joint venture. I just think that he wasn't prepared. Like when the opportunity presented himself to where he could have gone independent, I don't believe he was prepared for the business aspect of it from my viewpoint. And I think now, I think at that point when he did get that deal, since it was such a massive deal, he kind of thought he was on top of the world. And I don't believe he saw the downturn of his music, which I don't think the quality of his music ever took a downturn, but just I think it was a complete shift in the music altogether. So when he re-upped or when it was time for him to re-up, it's like they're looking at the numbers and they're like, these numbers are not as big as they were when we signed you for 400 million. So it's like he was already going to the table with a weak hand, and then he got into the beef situation, and that just completely kind of knocked out all of his leverage that he would have originally had. So the when I saw the petition, I was like, "Ooh, that don't look good," because I was like, he didn't really have any basis for it. I do understand why he wants to sue for sure, but when you're dealing with a company like that who has those type of lawyers, they're not concerned with that type of lawsuit. And I think they just have so many ways of covering themselves in terms of like the legal, like how they can frame things, it doesn't look, from my perspective, once again, I'm not a lawyer or a professional or by any stretch of the imagination, but just thinking from a defamation standpoint, it's hard for him to argue that UMG was strictly trying to defame him as opposed to promoting one of their personal artists. Like Kendrick is a part of UMG as well. So for everything that he's saying that they're doing to defame him, their counter argument would be like, it had nothing to do with you. We're just trying to make sure that this artist is doing good. And they were trying to make it go number one, and it became number one. And so even though, and the way Kendrick had worded everything in Not Like Us, which is the song that Drake is suing about, he didn't necessarily call him anything directly. So it's kind of more comes down to the interpretation of the lyrics. Even though all the hip hop fans know what Kendrick was saying, it's something that's difficult to to prove in court, and then that kind of gets into, are you going to use lyrics as evidence, or can you take it as true fiction? So I think it's very multi-layered in terms of what's going on with it. That's like,
Well, what about Drake's security concerns that he raises about his property in Canada being, I think it was on an album cover or something, and the way it was laid out, anybody who would pay close attention would realize that that was the layout for his house.
right.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Is that, again, is he just kind of grasping for straws? What?
Yeah, because I mean, everybody knew where Drake lived already. He lived in the what is the Canadian Embassy building, something to those lines. So it's very like, it didn't. I don't see anything where I'm like, oh, Drake has a point there. That's what I was looking for. I was like, oh, you might have a point there. I think like right now, I would believe his strongest argument would be the fact that they lifted the copyright laws for streamers to kind of react to Not Like Us, which I think did help it go viral. But once again, I think that could just be, they could frame that as, we're just trying to help our artist Kendrick, get the song out as much as possible. So it doesn't necessarily have to be anything directly negating Drake. And they're already saying that they had nothing to do with the song. And another thing about it is, if this was the first song that Kendrick had dropped, you would have a little bit more of a basis for it. But the fact that he dropped about 2 songs prior to Not Like Us, 2 or 3 songs actually. And in those other songs, he was kind of like, you don't want to go here. He kept saying like, you don't want to go here, and Drake was kind of the one egging it on, like, no, drop. I don't think you have anything, like, you know what I mean? And of course, because that's rap beef, but then now something comes out and it's a little bit too, I just think that he made a lot of steps in the whole battle overall. I think he had underestimated Kendrick. My biggest thing was, I was like, you needed to go at Kendrick directly instead of attacking everybody on the field. Like, you needed to actually take time and focus on Kendrick if you wanted to stand a chance. And because Kendrick had 3-4 songs worth of bars aimed directly at you, and you had, like, even on his best song, which might have been the best song from the whole Beef Family Matters, he only got half of the song. Even the song was like maybe 6 minutes, something like that. But like, when you just thinking about all of the information, and he's using perception, Kendrick was using perception to his advantage at the same time. So it's like, and I'm telling you, it's getting worse. The way things are playing out, everything that Kendrick said kind of boxed Drake in to the point where he can't even really reach out to other artists for help because of the way that Kendrick framed him as using people within the culture. So he's in a very tough spot, and there's I do like I don't want to get too carried away because there's a like I got a lot of thoughts on this. It got a lot of do with the gambling stuff that we talked about as well. Because I think Drake was planning on music not being his bread and butter, but I don't think he really factored in how impactful him being like the number one rapper was for his other endorsements. So it's like if you're the leader or the face of a gambling company, which I'm not saying he's the face of it, but you know he's a very big partner of Stake, which is the gambling company that he's partnered with. If you're people want to associate that with winners, so it's like you just lost a rap beef, so now people don't want to gamble with the person who just lost. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of a sight. Like before, you were known as a winner. You was always dropping hits. You was always going number one. So it's like, oh yeah, people feel trust when they bet their money with you, or they see that you're putting $1 million somewhere, then they're like, okay, well I could put 100 somewhere, and feel like it's a similar type of risk, but it's getting
So
tricky, man.
that's a very interesting point. Whether you talk about gambling or other kinds of endorsements that Drake may have, you make me think of two other things, and I'm trying to move on, but I think this is important, especially because of We the Sauce. So obviously, the timing of this suit is purposeful.
Yes.
The Super Bowl and Kendrick, which we know that's mediocre, is huge when you get to do the Super Bowl.
Right.
I don't remember, but I don't think Drake has done the Super Bowl yet, has he?
No, he hasn't.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure that he's a little salty about that because he came before Kendrick, as far as I can remember, and here Kendrick has come along, and after this huge year, everyone has pretty much said that Kendrick won the beef between them,
Mm-hmm.
and now Kendrick gets the Super Bowl. So I think for me, the timing of this suit has a little bit to do with that. But then I'll let you address that. But then the other thing that I wanted to ask, which if it's happened, it may not have happened amongst such high profile rappers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one rapper suing another rapper over lyrics. Because again, you talk about beef, when rap was started, rap was built on beef.
Right.
So this whole idea of him suing him about a statement, I mean, things just as bad or more outlandish has been said as a part of beefs.
Right.
And so my question is, do you think, and to the point that we probably have made on this platform, that it's a shame that allegedly beefs is what led to Biggie and Tupac's demise, even though I think I said on this show that there was outside forces that played a part in that.
Mm-hmm.
But there have clearly been rappers who got killed over a rap beef.
Right.
There's no doubt. So have we come up in the sense that instead of rappers killing each other over beef, they're now resorting to fighting it out in court?
Okay. Well, first I'll address the Super Bowl. So the real funny thing about the Super Bowl is if you remember, this beef kind of started off with a song from Drake's last album, For All the Dogs. It was the song with him and J. Cole.
You said that,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was called First Person Shooter. And so on that song, Drake kept saying, "Big as the Super Bowl." It was me and Cole, we over here. So it's just like that was part of the song. So
Mm,
that was kind of more of the get back from Kendrick. It's like, yeah, you're big as the Super Bowl. I'm actually doing the Super Bowl. So It's a lot of things that are playing out, and like that's why I'm like, that's one thing I gotta say. TDE is a very militant moving entity in hip hop. Like they're very strategic, everything that they do, and they have longevity in this game. So it's like they're moving, and I really feel like that's kind of TDE is Top Dog Entertainment. That
I
was
was getting ready to tell you,
yeah,
ask you to clarify that. Okay.
his that's his former label. So now Kendrick, he has fulfilled his initial duties with or his initial contract with Top Dog Entertainment, but they still work together. Like he was at their last Christmas drive and stuff like that. So they're still pretty close in terms of business and music making. Um, so I just wanted to say that the way that they move and they have new artists coming out. So it's like if you look at TDE as a label, because that's a label. Drake has his own label, which is OVO, and they're just not anywhere close on in terms of for a label. Because who's also on TDE is SZA, who's like one of the number one R&B singers as well. So they have a very stacked catalog and lineup over there. So that's, but yeah, Super Bowl was kind of its own thing. I do think since Drake is from Canada, it was a little bit different from him hosting the Super Bowl. I definitely believe he could have done a Super Bowl, and really still could do a Super Bowl depending on how things turn out for real. But because I mean he's making a lot of very drastic mistakes in my opinion. But in terms of the beef now, with it, is it better now that I think that there's so much money on the line for Drake that he has to sue. I think that's really what it comes down to. I think the amount of money, and I think if you do calculate endorsements and just the ramifications that would happen with his other endorsements, I think it's something where he kind of has to sue. It could affect other business ventures that he wants outside of music. If he's actually, which I don't believe anyone was necessarily directly anyone seriously. I don't believe any of the businesses were associating him with being someone who messed with children, as it alluded in the song "Not Like Us." But that's something that you would want to clean up for sure. But it's very tricky when you're talking about beef and because like you said, a lot of people lie in beef and in rap songs. So it's just
Of
like,
course.
where do we now
They
draw
make
the
stuff
line?
up.
Exactly. Like, and that's part of it's about getting creative. And I think that's the part that he doesn't want to admit. It's like Kendrick got creative with, because these it's not like he pulled it out of thin air. He said something that a lot of people have just accused Drake of not doing, but just like things that he's kind of been around for a long time. So it's like for something to stick, it's more because the people kind of wanted it to stick. You know what I mean? People wanted something crazy to be found out about Drake, and and it's since a lot of like when you hear a lot of personal stories about Drake, you it's sometimes people are like, well, they wouldn't be shocked because it's not so far out of their character, or it wouldn't be far based off of his character. I mean, of course, he has some people who vouch for him, but same thing we had with Diddy. So it's just like once we saw the tape of Diddy and Cassie, everyone's suspicions about Diddy was kind of just confirmed there, and so that's where Diddy had a very difficult time in the public perception. And it's like we didn't have necessarily any proof, but I think it actually, with the timing of it, I think with Diddy, people were just kind of ready to see all the major artists kind of get taken down, and similar with Jay-Z. Jay-Z's fighting that had the lawsuit put out against him as well, with him and Diddy, apparently essaying a 13-year-old girl from back in the day together. So things can get thrown out salaciously, and it has enough to ruin your reputation just off of that. So I just don't feel like I think Drake. I don't think he cares about hip hop anymore at the base of it. So I think that's more why he sued. I think
Wow, that's a huge statement.
yeah, I think he's really more concerned with his outside business ventures than his reputation in hip hop. And I think that's more what what we're seeing from that lawsuit, because he's pointing out a lot of like he's pointing out how the culture kind of came and supported Kendrick over him. Like he's talking about streamers um reacting to it, which helped it grow even bigger. But it's like, yeah, if you were kind of more for the culture, then the streamers would be like, nah, we ain't doing this, or they believe him a little bit more. And I'm not saying that they necessarily believe that he was doing the things that was alleged in the and not like us, but it wasn't anything alleged. It was just he just kind of had some bars, and it was kind of more. Even with the picture you were talking about of his house having the sex offender markings on it, as like you have somebody in your in your camp who was who was fighting those charges. So it's like, and that was one of the questions he had. He said, he's like, that guy has a weird case, why are you still hanging around him? And I'm referring to a guy named Baka Not Nice, who is within the OVO entourage, who was fighting a sex trafficking case, I believe. I believe he beat it though. I don't believe he was convicted of it. But that was who he was saying. Kendrick said, he was like, Baka has a weird case. Why is he around? Certified lover boy, certified. And that's why I'm like, you can't really say that he said it directly about Drake, or that he would. It's like he's kind of referring to the people who you've been around, and that's true. So
I got to push you a little bit more. So,
okay.
if I remember correctly, you did a show with one of your other partners talking about J. Cole,
Mm-hmm.
because allegedly, didn't J. Cole recently drop his final project? Is that what that project was supposed to be?
So he's planning on dropping his final album, which is called The Fall Off. So that should be, I think it's projected to come out this year.
Okay. And am I correct that you had a conversation about that project
Yes.
already?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask you this, because you made mention of the Drake song that J. Cole actually appeared on.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, based upon what I learned from you, when Kendrick originally started coming for folks, he didn't just come for Drake. If I remember correctly, he also came for Jay as well. Is that right?
To a degree. So first song, really, J. Cole has been J. Cole has been tying them three together since his mixtape days. I actually went back, I think, listened to Friday Night Lights, which was one of his earlier mixtapes. I think it came out maybe 2012, maybe. I might not be right on that, but back then he had a bar about Drizzy, Kendrick, or Cole. Like he was just like, so he started pairing their names together years ago, and so I think that was kind of the start of developing those as the big three. And then so in the first person shooter song, that's when J. Cole was like, I feel like the big three is me, Drake, and Kendrick, and I forgot exactly how the bar went, but that was what Kendrick had then responded to, because he was like, there's no big three, it's just big me. So he said that
Right. Okay.
he said that on Future song. And so after that, J. Cole, then he responded with, he dropped a mixtape called Might Delete Later. And on the last song, it had a song called 7 Minute Drill, where he was dissing Kendrick. He was saying that his last couple of projects weren't really that good, this, that, and the third, and he didn't really get the greatest reception for it because people were then looking at J. Cole's album and like, you don't have any room to talk about albums, really. And he ended up actually deleting that last song from the project. So the whole project is still up there, but he deleted the 7 minute drill that was dissing Kendrick. And so then people were kind of saying that put Drake in a weird position because when J. Cole did delete it, he was on, I think he had his music festival, Dreamville, and he was saying on stage, he was like, yeah, I couldn't, he's like, it didn't sit right with me. He was like, I would have lost a brother. I would have won the war, but I would have lost a brother. And so he didn't want to take it to that point, basically. And so then he took the song back. And then after that, that's when Drake had dropped the song finally. And he was like, yeah, no, Cole is feeling some type of way about it. I'm not. He was like, yeah, Cole's losing sleep over it. It ain't me. That was one of the bars Drake had, and so then that's when they started getting into the back and forth between Drake and Kendrick. So, yeah, so J. Cole has been right in the middle, and then he dropped a song called, I want to say, dang, what's the name of that song? It was like Port something. It was but it was basically a song, and I described it. It was like he kind of sidestepped the beef, like while they kind of killed each other, like Drake and Kendrick, and he was kind of on his way to winning the race. That was the sentiment I got from the song that J. Cole dropped after his project and after, you know, Drake and Kendrick were going back and forth. So it was like because he even had a bar. He's like, yeah, I got their blood on me, like stuff. So it was just, it didn't sit the greatest with me because I'm like, you were in the middle of it for so long, and then you kind of remove yourself right at the at the time when things get a little ugly.
And so, picking up on that statement about him removing himself,
Mm-hmm.
of course, that's where I'm going with asking you about this final album.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with J. Cole? I mean, is there something going on that we don't know that's driving him pulling out of the beef and pulling out of rap? What's really going on?
I, I mean, I think what he said where he didn't want to lose a brother was probably the closest. Like I don't think he wanted to take it to that point. But I think the problem is that has been J. Cole's, like, that's been kind of his MO since he's been in the game. Like, I'm the best. I want it with whoever, you know, whoever's rapping, I'm trying to rap against them. And so a lot of people felt that, yeah, you could have kept it rap and, you know, prove that, you know, without losing, or, you know, have it competitive. So it's hard to say what his I think he's kind of he doesn't necessarily care about, well, people say he doesn't care about being famous necessarily, and I don't think he cares about the fame, but I do think that he wants to be the best rapper. So
And that, not to cut you off, but that's the other side of it, because I think I told you, obviously you've introduced me to a lot of the, I'll just label it, new school rappers. And J. Cole is, you know, he's one of, for me, he's one of the elite.
mhm,
And I wonder, and I feel cheated, honestly,
mhm,
because as somebody that appreciates bars and grew up with Big Daddy Kane and Rakim and people who drop bars,
mhm.
with Jay being one of them, Kendrick being one of them, I wanted to see him.
Right.
I wanted to see him go. And I have to ask you, I know, I'm pretty sure you've been asked this before. Who do you think, what do you think would have happened if Jay would have taken the challenge? Jay against Kendrick.
J. Cole against Kendrick. Um, I feel like there's a lot to say about J. Cole. Like, I think that Kendrick would have had a lot of material or and a lot of critiques that he could have brought up against J. Cole. Like I think that Kendrick is technically skilled enough to go up against J. Cole. Like I think J. Cole is technically, I always say he's technically the best by like, flow kind of like when it comes to the fundamentals of rap, like how he puts bars together, like he does it in a very fundamental way. But when it comes to standing up to critiques, it's like because I remember he was kind of there was a rapper. She's a rapper. She's kind of more of well no she's a rapper though. Don't no name is definitely a rapper. She's but she's like a Chicago rapper and she has some critical things to bring up about him. Not even in a rap song. It was just kind of about. Actually, she did bring. I'm sorry, I'm messing up her whole. Shout out to No Name, but yeah, she had brought up some things that J. Cole had never really addressed, just like because I think she was a little bit more educated in some areas that J. Cole was talking about. And so when it was kind of brought to light, he's like, "Yo, you're kind of being very basic or very surface level when it comes to certain issues." Um, and I think that's a very weak point of J. Cole at times is that it kind of seems deep, but when you really think about it, it's not necessarily going as deep as Kendrick is going on certain subject matters. And it's more because if you listen to a lot of his songs, it's kind of from a like he had a project called For Your Eyes Only, and it was from the perspective of somebody else. Oh, it was like from the perspective of one of his friends who had died, and then he was like this was like a mixtape for his daughter to listen later on. So he's very creative in how he can kind of express himself, but I think it's missing that authenticity a lot of times when you really get down to it. Like with Kendrick, he's speaking from a perspective of a good kid in a mad city. Like, yeah, he was around a lot of gang activity and he was kind of trying to rise above it. So people had an angle, and I'm speaking mainly from Black American culture that people could kind of connect to. J. Cole, he's almost I want to say he's closer to Drake because although he's from North Carolina, he kind of got his start in New York, and I think he kind of got his cosign from Jay-Z. So it's like he has a very big. That's why he's so big in hip hop, I think. Like, and people kind of look at him to when you're thinking about what core hip hop or original hip hop is. That's why it's such a strong correlation to J. Cole as opposed to Kendrick, who's on the West Coast. And Drake is kind of more, I always say he's like an alien because he can go over here, he can go to the South, he can go to the West Coast, he got people in New York. Actually, I don't know if I've ever heard a Drake New York song, now that I think about it. Fetty Wap, he had a song with Fetty Wap, but that was like new wave, it wasn't necessarily bar hip hop. So, but yeah, I would think, I would have my money on Kendrick if it was him against J. Cole. But I mean, I don't know exactly what J. Cole might know about Kendrick. So, I think if he had, an ace in the hole in terms of information, I think he could have, done something in a creative way that could have, made people look at Kendrick a certain way. Like, for me, like, to me, I always say, how did they become the big three? Because none of them are my personal favorite rappers. And none of them, well, Drake gets played at a lot of like, events, functions, parties and stuff. But yeah, J. Cole and Kendrick, it's kind of hard to tell what the gauge is. So I kind of almost feel like we were fed, I wouldn't say fed those three, but actually when me and Chris were talking about it, we kind of realized that everyone kind of had a major cosign. Like Kendrick had Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg give him the cosign. J. Cole had Jay-Z, and then Drake had Wayne. So, with those major players kind of influencing them to go to the be the forefront of the next wave of hip hop. That's kind of why they've stood like head and shoulders above their peers in a lot of as time has moved on. Because I think like if we got to bring in Big Sean and Wale into into the conversation, I definitely think that I was much more of a Wale fan than any of them for me personally. So and for him to not be in those conversations, even though to me he got way more hits than J. Cole, and like a lot more songs that people know and are familiar with in different settings than J. Cole. So
And I just have to stick my 2 cents in.
mhm.
Yes, amongst the new age rappers, Wale is definitely in the mix. And in fact, one of my favorite songs, I think I told you, is something he and J. Cole did
Yeah.
together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think to be, I used to think because they're really from the blog era. So back when Hot New Hip Hop was a website um, that like used to give us all of the new rapper news, and it was kind of it was a nationwide thing. So you got to learn about rappers from different areas from blogs. So they had Hot New Hip Hop. Dat Piff was a site that had like where you could download the music from. So that was a very influential on how people my age were starting to get music. So from the internet anyway. So it's like we would learn about. I learned about J. Cole from Hot New Hip Hop. I learned about I knew Drake from like Degrassi, and then people was like, "Oh, he raps too," and then I was like, "Okay," so I started listening to him. I'm pretty sure I found out about Kendrick through Hot New Hip Hop, so it was kind of like a hub of music where, or the blog, they called it the blog era of music, um, and people were getting, you can get all of these different sounds, or you'd hear so many different people from different regions, and that was kind of the melting pot from the internet perspective of music. So that's how Wale, Big Sean, I found out about him from Hot New Hip Hop as well. And as all of them were coming together, it was kind of hard because it's all the top people from each region, but you're listening to them all at the same time. But you might only want to hear people you might only be listening to or accustomed to listening to people from New York. And now you're hearing people from Texas. And now you're hearing people from Florida. So now it's like, okay, you're the best in Texas, but are you better than this person in Florida, even though you're not making the same type of music at all? So that was a very interesting point. That was actually like High New Hip Hop is one of the inspirations for We the Sauce, really. So just to kind of bring that concept of different regions or people representing for different regions and like showing how hip hop as a culture was all kind of culminated through, or it's the different sounds of different regions, like black people over here, and not just black people, but the sound of hip hop, like what rap is popular here, what music is popular there, and kind of combining it all to see what we really like.
I wonder, listening to you, I wonder if in 2025 we're going to see an even bigger jump as far as the influence of international artists. You, of course, you shared with me a song that got some popularity that Little Baby did with, I guess that artist was from the UK.
Yeah, Central C. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, when we talk about Afrobeats,
Mm-hmm.
a part of Afrobeats covers hip hop. Hip hop is infused in that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious when we think about the conversation that we had the last time about hip hop and the NBA and how American basketball is really becoming an international thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if in a little while, that's what we're going to see happen to hip
Definitely,
hop.
definitely.
Because um, I know, I know, I know you made some statements about who was leading the charts in 2024, and clearly it was women. Period.
Hmm.
But I wonder when we talk about just energy. I know that Afrobeats has brought a lot of energy to the American music scene. Period.
Hmm.
And I wonder if its influence will continue to grow on American hip hop.
Yeah, I well, they actually took in 2024. They took a very big step back for okay. Let me. I think they finally started to commercialize Afro beats a little bit more. So you had the artist Tyla. So she's from South Africa, I believe, and she had a lot of awards. A very successful song called Water that people were, and I think that was kind of a big step for Afro beats as a genre. um
So, not to cut you off, so
mhm.
Tyler would be kind of like a modern day Mary J. Blige correlation to hip hop.
I wouldn't say. I would say she's closer to Rihanna. I want to say she's
Oh,
Rihanna.
Rihanna.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay,
So
okay,
it's
got
not really so. It's like dance music. It's closer to pop, I would say.
it.
So,
Okay,
and that's why
okay.
I'm saying the more of a commercialized version of Afro beats as opposed to like when Tim's and Burna Boy. So to me, the first introduction of Afro beats was Burna Boy. He had a song called Yeah, and it was like you couldn't understand anything he said, but it was just a vibe. It was like yeah. So, but it was like, oh, people really connected with it because they was just like, oh, okay, I recognize that vibe. And he's blown up very big from being from that song, and he continues to have an audience. There's been some other big Afrobeats artists. Rima is really big. He's like probably one of my favorite Afrobeats artists. Who else is there? Omale. So they got a lot of Ayara Star. She's good. So but the year I think 2022 and 2023 was when I started, because I kind of gauge it by YouTube views. So before, from a YouTube perspective, if a video is getting, let's say, 100,000 views within the first 2 days, that's, to me, that's the indication that, okay, check out that song. A lot of people are listening to that. And so normally when it's a black artist, it would be a hip hop song. And then so what I started noticing in 2022 and 2023 was that I'm clicking on them, and then it's like, oh, it's not English, but it would be Afro beats. It would be black faces, but it was still doing numbers. And so that's when I started recognizing that, okay, Afro beats is really starting to come along. But that's also when I started to notice the decline of hip hop, because major artists would be dropping, and it would take them like 3 to 4 days to hit 100, 100K views and stuff. So that's more how I gauge the growth of something. But there was so many Afrobeat songs coming out during 2022, 2023. And if this year the volume of Afrobeats wasn't as high, but they had some big songs from the Afrobeat genre, which kept it alive and kind of brought it to the forefront. So um, yeah, Tyla, she got a very critically acclaimed album. Um, and then Ayara Star, her album was amazing as well. Like, very good project overall. It didn't get as much. To me, I don't think it got as much shine as Tyla's album, but I still see the genre, I see them setting up for it to grow in the future. So I think Afrobeats is going to continue to grow, and it's just kind of getting everything away from um, American hip hop, really, because I really don't. I don't know. Like I've been saying for a long time, I don't know how much longer hip hop can really survive. Like the way that I just don't see anything majorly positive coming more from hip hop anymore. And especially, I think Drake is kind of the last, almost the last hope for hip hop, because as much as people want to say, I don't know how long Kendrick can hold the game up, because he's a little bit older in his career. So it's like if we're looking for, it's like I think we're maybe taking away hit songs being in hip hop anymore, and it kind of being moved more internationally. But to be honest, I would say that the biggest thing that helps Afrobeats is that people don't understand it. So it's like you can play it in a you can play it in the mall, and it's just a vibe. So it's like when the guy had the Yeah song, it's like, yeah, it's like it can play, and people, it's no profanity in it. So you can play it in the malls, you can play it in the store, you can play it in the car with your kids, and you're just vibing. You're not necessarily thinking about what the subject matter is, even though they have some of the same elements hip hop does. But yeah, when you talking about these hit rap songs, it's like, yeah, you don't want to hear about spinning the block, or you know getting things back in blood, all of that. So it's like that's also causing a decline of what we have as hip hop today. And even when you look at Lil Baby just dropped the project Top of the Year. And I think people are a little bit tired of Lil Baby, and I think he's even gotten better as a rapper. But I think what people liked originally about Lil Baby was his rawness originally. Like I think his biggest song is Freestyle, which is no hook, no nothing. It's just him rapping for like 2 to 3 minutes straight. And yeah, I think he's trying to learn how to structure songs a little bit better. But he used to have songs with Gunna, and once they kind of fell out because of the whole snitching stuff, it kind of exposed Lil Baby for not being too melodic, or kind of having kind of a monotonous flow. He's I think he's really the because I always thought he could rap, but it was never really super engaging to me for the type of what I look for in hip hop necessarily. Like I liked it for when you go to a party. He's always good at giving guest verses, but I always say he doesn't have any like a signature for himself. Like um, if you listen to like a Future song, Future has like a certain swag to him, and like the way his voice is and what he says is kind of a little bit more noticeable. Like you're like, okay, I can recognize this as a Future song. There's not really a way, like a type of song that you would recognize Lil Baby for. He doesn't have any like ad libs that he's really known for. So I think all of that together kind of hurts his image, especially when there's so many rappers. It's like it's hard to pick him out of a lineup when it just comes to his bars. Which I mean, he's still young, so I mean, I'm hoping that he can address that and kind of get a little bit more musically inclined, which he's talked about in interviews. He had an interview with Lil Yachty, and it was saying that he is just now kind of learning how to ask the engineer to change his voice, or add some effects to it. So I think because he was someone who just came from the streets and started rapping. So he never necessarily anticipated on being a rapper. But once you start to get so much money in it, it's like, okay, now you gotta continue to make this work. And he used to just kind of pull from his experiences of being on the street, and just kind of hustling. And now it's like, it's not to say that hunger is gone, but it's like you have to now be smarter about what you say. Like, who knows what information he was giving out back in the day that we just weren't privy to, and that he's now second guessing when he's talking about stuff, whether it be a situation he was involved in, or just different activities he was doing. So I think all of that goes into just the decline of rap music in general. Like, and yeah, the Afro beats. You see, Gunna's now, he's over in Africa, trying to get his fan base up over there. So, and he's like much more melodic. So I think he fits in a lot better with the Afro beats wave that's coming. And yeah, I think as the companies see that, they're gonna just be like, well, yeah, we want to definitely go towards the safer route, and a route that they see making more money in the future.
So you got me curious because for the rappers that came from the streets, as you said, Lil Baby is one of the people that I actually respect and feel is authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of my favorite songs of his is "Something to Prove." Uh, I'm curious now to to listen to his new project, just
Mm-hmm.
based upon the things that you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Well, I tell you what, I'm I'm always fascinated and excited to pick your brain about all the going ons in hip hop, and I kind of felt like we definitely needed to address the Drake thing
Mm-hmm. For
with
sure.
with it being fresh and you being a subject matter expert. I did want to raise a few points before our time is up that I think might be helpful to our audience as they do some planning for the new year.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one, people often make New Year's resolutions,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to frame this as a question,
Okay.
and I'm going to ask you because I know you know the answer. What's wrong with these types of New Year's resolutions or New Year's New Year goals? A person might say, "I plan to save more money in the new year.
Mm-hmm.
I want to lose weight. I want to work out more."
Mm-hmm.
What's the problem with those goals?
Um, from my experience, the problem with those goals is, one, they're not specific enough. Um, Two, you're not giving any. I mean, you want to say the whole year, but you're not really giving a deadline for yourself, or anything that's measurable. Like, it's things that aren't measurable. So you saying that you want to lose weight, it's like, maybe you could say, I want to lose a pound a month, and that's obtainable. But people will say, oh, I want to lose 30 pounds this year, and they have no. You need a plan for that. So yeah, I would say New Year's resolutions. If you do want to continue to do that, set a just have a monthly goal, if or make it smaller increments, make things. And I think also certain things might be too large for, and it seems impossible for you to tackle. So if you say that I want to lose 20 pounds this year, that's a very big that's a very big feat to accomplish. And some people be like, well, I got 12 months up, but it's like, you need to do something consistently for all 12 of those months in order to make sure that you're sticking to that goal. So that'll be my quick answer for what's wrong with that.
That's right. That's right. So I think our first big tip is to make sure that the goals that you set are specific and not vague like the ones that I gave. And you would be surprised, as a coach, you would be surprised at how often people will make vague goals like that. Even on the financial side,
Mm-hmm.
when people come from financial coaching. Say, okay,
Okay.
what's your goal for the new year? Well, I want to save money.
Mm.
That's not good enough
No,
because save. Well, you're going to save a penny. Okay,
that's money.
right. Okay, you succeeded for 2025. You saved a penny,
Right.
and like you said, it needs to be realistic because if you've never been able to save $1,000, to say that you're going to save $1,000 in 2 weeks, that might be a large stretch. So you want to, and a lot of times the reason why people give up so quickly is because the goal is not realistic.
Mm.
So if you're on a weight loss quest, you also need to put a plan into place that's going to actually help you to lose the weight. So you might say, okay, I want to lose 25 pounds. Surrounding that statement, you need to have, like Dre said, a plan to actually lose the weight. Okay, so ask yourself, what is it that contributed to you gaining the weight in the first place?
Mm.
Well, part of it has to do with food. So, what adjustments are you going to make as it relates to food that's going to help you to get the weight off?
Mm.
Now, I want to go in a sort of a different direction because, a lot of the stuff I just said, people they have heard before. But one of the things that I think is important, and it's still early enough, for some people, they started in 2024 with this. One of the things that is necessary for most people to come up with solid goals is to give themselves the space to think. Set aside some time to actually think and write it down. There's study after study that shows that people who take the time to write down what their goals are have exponentially more success than people who just allow their goals to float around in their head.
Mm.
Because one of the things that I often say as relates to New Year's resolutions is most people have some things as they approach the new year that they say that they want to do. But life has a way, as people are accustomed to saying now, of lifing.
Mm.
And what happens to those people who just allow their goals to float around in their head as lifes, those goals are just floating around in your head, it gets pushed out
Right.
by life. And the next thing you know, that person who had these amazing goals in December of the year before, by the time they get to October of the present year, in a lot of cases, they've ran out of time
Right.
to accomplish that goal. So take the time to actually write it down. Now, there's a woman. Her name is Terry Foy, and she's an expert on all this stuff. I would recommend that our audience get some of her material. And I borrowed a few points from her. She said that one of the ways you can tell that you actually need to set some time aside, and that might mean actually getting away. It might mean literally getting out into nature and getting quiet by yourself, or
Mm.
even going out of town and booking a hotel room, whatever it means to you to actually get some quiet time. For some people, it might need to be a whole day. If you're trying to put together this master plan for your business, or if it's something more simple for your family, it might just need you just might need 6 hours. Everybody's different, but there's some telltale signs that you actually need to set the time aside. Number one, if you find that you're always tired. So if you feel like you're always worn out, that's a sign that you need to get away to reconfigure some things,
Mm.
to pull back from your routine, from your regular. Let's say that you had something that initially you were super excited about. but all of a sudden you kind of dragging on it. That's another sign that you need to get away. You need to back up, get quiet, and figure out why has the thrill left you as it relates to that particular thing. Additionally, if you're that person who, no matter when we see you, you're always in a rush, you every day you wake up on the run, and you're on the run until your head hits the pillow. More than likely, you haven't given yourself an opportunity to understand where your blind spots are because you're constantly on the move. But sometimes when we allot the time to get quiet, and some of us we allot that time every day. I recommend that you try to get that time in, that downtime in every day. Sometimes you might find yourself in a particular stretch, especially for those of us who are business owners, where you just got to get it. Well, if you are not able to get that time on a daily basis, then this setting the time aside to get away for a day or for a weekend becomes even more important for you. If you're not clear about what your next step should be, so let's say that you have had a tremendous amount of success, just like Drake was talking about earlier about Drake. Drake had a lot of success when he first worked his deal, and now he's run into a bump in the road. And so if you find yourself at that point where you're not sure what to do, you may be at a point where you're not sure what to do with your children. Your children, you don't seem to be able to communicate with them. You're not relating in school. Things are going from bad to worse. Again, if things are not working, that might be a sign that you need to take a step back and and evaluate some things. Things are not working. Did you want to chime in on any of that, Dre?
Yeah. I think a major thing that people, one thing I think would be a good New Year's resolution for people is to have a bedtime. I
Mm,
think so many people just go and they're like, I'll fall asleep whenever I fall asleep. And then if you're not going to sleep at a consistent time, that means you're not waking up at a consistent time. And that means that your sleep schedule is so impactful on just so much that you do throughout the day. Like that's something that you actually have control on. Don't feel like you're missing out on things if you're going to bed after, or if you're staying up after 10 o'clock. Like go to sleep at 10, wake up at a decent time, fully rested, and get a good start to your day. Don't wake up 5 minutes before you have to clock into work, or just an hour before you gotta get dressed and give yourself that time in the morning. I think that's been something that's helped me. Like I used to just go to sleep, and I think it's from being a kid. Like when you're a kid, you'd be like you want to stay up all night. Then when you finally get onto your own, you're like, okay, well I could stay up as long as I want to, and then you realize that you sleeping, or you still know you need to wake up early, and you just don't try and get the naps in through the middle of the day because that throws off your whole rhythm. So just try and get your full 8 hours of sleep is the goal. I need to work on that too. I get to bed. My bedtime is at 10 o'clock, so I do try to be in bed at 10, and I wake up at 5:30 to do my stuff. But it kind of gives me a lot of That's the time when I feel I have most control over what's happening in my day because nobody else is up at that time. So I'm not getting any text messages. I'm not answering emails. There's nothing on TV to watch at that time. So that's my time that I take to really take control of my day and plan it out. And I think when you start your day on your terms, you're not waking up to a fire or waking up to people asking you for stuff already, then you just have a much more peaceful day.
That's good stuff, Dre. And con- continuing to look at the influence of hip hop, of course, growing up in hip hop, a lot of artists, even in their lyrics, would talk about, you sleep when you die and all that kind of stuff. And
Mm,
so, what you're saying is a welcome diversion from perhaps what the culture has taught for so many years, because that's a very unhealthy culture.
mm-hmm.
You know, a lot, and mixed into that culture, which is something that came up in a previous, in more than one session. A lot of those artists who live that way, they end up having to use drugs
Right.
to stay awake,
Mm-hmm.
because the body requires a certain amount of rest, period. And once you cross that threshold, it's going to go for that rest. And so they end up using, uppers and all these other things
Right.
to break that boundary. But you pay a price in other ways, with your body.
Yes, indeed. Actually, because that video you sent me earlier this week about the people saying you don't get old, or young people don't they don't aim to be old. Like my goal is I want to at least see 100 personally. Like
Yes, sir.
that's been one of my goals for a long time. Now actually I want to live to 106 so I could see the year 21 21,000 or 2,100. I'm sorry.
Wow,
So that's
that's a
that's
great
that's
goal.
uh that's the type of goal that I have. But that video that you sent me where it was saying that a lot of these kids idolize dying young. That's another symptom of hip hop. Like we've idolized all of these artists who have died young: Tupac, Biggie, from the new school, Pop Smoke, Juice World, XXX. So it's like people wanna people wanna die before they have to really experience or have to go through the hard part of life, like being middle aged, regular, just kind of dealing with responsibilities of being an adult. People want to die so young and kind of go out at the top, but that shouldn't be the goal, and that's what a lot of hip hop teaches. Like where they're trying to use the drugs early, and that is just very dangerous to be the message within the culture. So I just wanted to mention that because yeah, people who are on the drugs also, it hurts your sleeping habits because now you can't go. Sometimes it makes you not go to sleep. Sometimes it makes you sleep at the wrong time. So now you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's like that leads to depression. People waking up in the middle of the day is not it's hard to, and that goes to employment as well, because if you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, not many not many jobs are gonna be available unless you're doing part-time. But it's like, how is that gonna lead to you having a sustainable career? So you want to be able to wake up at a decent time to where you're not gonna be oversleeping for work, you're not gonna be missing work because you overslept. Those are the things that we want to avoid.
And I would be remiss not to re-echo. Not only did you say we should aim for bedtime, but have for a time, a respectable time to wake up. Because again, if you don't wake up until business hours, then by the time you actually wake up, you could have gotten 100 emails. Your text messaging is all blowed up. And so when you say that you wake up at 5:30, yeah, I mean, if you're doing international business, you still want to have your email and stuff blown up. But typically in the United States, that puts you ahead
Trying to beat the
of the
game,
normal office hour. Yeah, yeah.
you in competition with everybody. You gotta get a head start on people. Everybody got the same 24 hours, so you want to be ahead of the curve. By 9 o'clock, how much have you done? Like, you want to get your work done as quick as possible, and then have more control of your day. So it's like I have the option. Like since I'm waking up so much, like I don't have to start work until probably I think my first meeting is 9:30. But so for those hours prior to that, I have time to if I want to sleep in a little bit more, I got that option. I can exercise at that point. I can, make my breakfast, get everything together that I need to, get my mind, make plans for what I'm doing after work. It just gives you so much more control over your day, and you're not constantly reacting to just everything. That's why I always say it's better to. I personally believe it's better to work out in the morning because you have less excuses. Like so many things can go on throughout the day that can deter you from achieving that goal. So that goes back to the goal setting. If you wanna, you have to eliminate the amount of excuses that have the opportunity to pop up in your life if you want to achieve certain goals. So.
And and sometimes for some people, especially if they feel like they are in a stagnant place, it's a good idea to set some very achievable goals for yourself every day. For an example, I heard one of my mentors say, "Make your bed up every day."
Every day,
I
yep.
mean, that's something that you can do. So if nothing else happens, when you get home, your bed is made up. And I heard something, Dre, that I had not heard before, and there's a piece of it that I think that I might incorporate it as a business leader. There's one executive that he's established a rule. Now, of course, in his company, they work. It's actually it's actually a ministry, so they work sort of intimately with one another. It's different than working at a manufacturing plant or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he has a policy that before he hires anyone, he will make a surprise visit to their home.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is he's trying to see what that person's norm is. In other words, if he comes to your house and your house is in total disarray, he's predicting that if he hires you, the area that you're in charge of will be in total disarray.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's not practical for him to make an impromptu visit to the house, he will figure out a way to get into that person's vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So, with me saying that, for some people, one of the things that they could plan to do in the new year is do a better job of managing their property. Because usually at the start of the year, you always have people that will say, I want to get a new apartment, or I want to get move into a new house.
Mm-hmm.
But the house or the car that the person has currently, it's always a wreck. I never forget. I got into the car of a friend of mine, and this was a luxury car. Not it wasn't old. It was pretty fairly new, and I was stunned when I got inside. There was stuff all over the back seat. It looked like, you know,
They were
the
living
person
in there.
in the car. And then there was fries uh, in between the cracks on the floor, and
Mm-hmm.
wrappers from food establishments. I was thinking like, oh wow. I mean, what's the use of pushing this luxury vehicle if you're going to keep it like this?
Right.
You might as well just, push
A hoopty.
hoopty. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's your outside world reflects your inside world. That's so I did a lot of that's something I try to control in my life as well. Like my car, I always try and keep my car clean in the areas that I occupy the most. But one thing I wanted to say about working out is, or you was talking about getting like early making your bed. At times when I was like looking for jobs and stuff, one thing that I would do was I would wake up, I would make sure exercising was my way of paying myself. If I didn't, like, I was looking at that as, okay, if nothing else happened, I know that I got my, I did something healthy for my body. So it's like, look at those things and like put yourself first when you're thinking about your day. It's like, what can I do to make sure that you did something productive? It doesn't take much. It doesn't take many push-ups to be more than, be in the top 1% of people who did push-ups that day. So it's like,
That's right.
aim for, if you do 10 push-ups a day, you did more than 80% of people in America that day. So it's like, see, it can be small goals, but just make sure that you're picking something that you want to win that day. If it's walking a half a mile, just do something small.
Well, Dre, I think this might be a good stopping point. I've got some other tips that I can share the next time around.
Okay.
I think it's always good to be respectful of people's time, and I think our audience would really enjoy um, a lot of the things that you shared in relation to the whole Drake and Kendrick Lamar situation with the lawsuit. And for those people who may have jumped on late, that was a big part of what we talked about in the beginning.
Right.
Um, yeah, and hopefully, we'll do this again in a couple of weeks.
Yep, for sure, man. Thank you so much for joining me back into the new year 2025. We did really great last year, honestly. The amount of videos that we dropped, we really knocked it out the park with our consistency. We really didn't miss too many episodes. So
And I guess, man, it's probably easy to look at whatever the first one was, but we should be coming up on the anniversary soon because it seems like we dropped the first in March or April or something.
yeah, let me check real quick. I want to say it was March. Let me see. First video.
I know what the topic was. It was consistency.
Yep. Let's see. Yeah, I did. Let's see. Our first live was, yep, March 20th.
Wow.
So yep, we're about 2 months away from having a whole year of
Wow, that's huge, man. Well, big up to you. Big up to you because again, your generation doesn't get credit for sticking with anything. So
gotta break that trend. So
yeah,
and
yeah.
I appreciate you for sticking with me and us coming together, like having someone reliable on the other side of the screen is like so invaluable. I can't thank you enough for helping me grow this to what we have, and it's only up from here. We'll continue to give this for the people who have been tuning in and people who will tune in the future. So I just like the direction things are going, man.
Well, bless up, man. Well, everybody have a good night. Thank you, Dre, and we'll do it again soon.
Yep, everyone. Thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next time. So, everyone, peace out. We'll have a great day.